Who ever knew the end of the world could be this much fun? Alright everybody, today we're going all the way back to 1977 to look at a little flick that kind of has its own little cult status, kind of has a special place in many people's hearts. Not saying it's great, but we'll get to all that in a moment. We're talking about Damnation Alley. But before we go any further, before we look into this gem anymore, once and again, and as always, to the trailer.
Multiple warhead strike confirmed. Retaliatory strike on advisement.
Contacts at hostile missiles heading to major U.S. population targets. Launch retaliatory missiles. All enemy targets.
You have seen great adventures. Now you're about to live one. Damnation Alley. Everything man remembers is gone. Everything he has achieved is forgotten. Every place he has lived has become a wasteland, desolate, barren. And these 5 survivors may be the only humans left alive. Together, they will attempt a journey into the unknown. Only their courage and the instinct to live could carry them safely through the hell that lies ahead. The devastation of man. And the mutations of nature gone wild. And somehow, they must endure this journey through the nightmare of what we once knew as Earth. Somehow they must survive this journey through Damnation Alley. Starring Michael Vincent, George Peppard, Dominique Sanda, Paul Winfield, Jackie Earle Haley. Produced in the magic of Sound 360. More than a motion picture, an adventure you'll never forget.
Alright, this little gem was directed by Jack Smight. Not the biggest career, but a few things will hit you. Okay, we're talking about he did Airport 75, The Illustrated Man, Strategy of Terror, No Way to Treat a Lady, Harper, Fast Break, that old Rags was a pretty bad movie, Midway, and needed TV stuff, you know what I mean? Like, you know, McCloud and Columbo. And that's going to figure into this a little bit later on. But it is what it is. That's what he did. Let's keep going. All right, playing Jake Tanner. Oh yeah, the legendary Michael Vincent. I've talked about him 2 times in other movies I've reviewed, and they're going to come up in this list I give you. We're talking about he was in little gems like Going Home, The Mechanic, Big Wednesday, Hooper, which you know I already covered, White Line Fever, Baby Blue Marine, Defiance, which I already covered, Buffalo 66, The World's Greatest Athlete, and Hard Country, and of course we all know, I've said it before, I'll say it again, Stringfellow Hawk, Airwolf. Enough said. Alright, playing Major Sam Denton, rather uptight individual. We are talking about, well, the character, not the guy. Well, maybe both. George Peppard. Let's dig into this. We're talking about he was in Breakfast at Tiffany's. He was in Pork Chop Hill, in The Carpetbaggers, and How the West Was Won, in The Blue Max, and The Third Day, and The Victors, and come on, he was in Battle Beyond the Stars, and Race for the Yankees effort. And of course, he was on a bunch of television shows, and obviously, he was on the A-Team. What more needs to be said? Go Hannibal. Playing Keegan, late great Paul Winfield. Let's do this. We're talking about he was in little gems like Hustle and Huckleberry Finn and the greatest, remember that movie about Muhammad Ali and Carbon Copy and Star Trek II, The Wrath of Friggin' Khan, one of my favorite movies of all time, top 5 without a doubt. Mike's Murder and Cliffhanger and The Serpent and the Rainbow and Mars Attacks and Dennis the Menace and The Terminator. Come on, you all remember him from The Terminator. And he was in a whole shitload of television shows, too. So, Paul Winfield, big career. A lot of credits. Playing Billy, the one, the only, Jackie Earle Haley. Let's run the numbers. We're talking about he was in stuff like Breaking Away, for Christ's sake, and The Day of the Locust, and Losing It, and Doll Man, and Maniac Cop 3, and Semi-Pro, and he was in The Watchmen, and Dark Shadows, and RoboCop, the reboot, actually, and Parkland, and Lincoln, and Shutter Island, and of course he will always be Kelly Leak from The Bad News Bears, and The Bad News Bears Breaking Training, and The Bad News Bears Go to Japan. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. Playing Janice, Dominique Sanda. Now, she was a French actress. There's not that much I can throw at you that you might remember or recognize, but let's take a shot anyway. We're talking about she's been in little things like Utopia, and The Macintosh Man, and Beyond Good and Evil, which is also the name of a very good record by The Cult that gets underrated, by the way, and Steppenwolf, and Voyage of Terror, and The Crimson Rivers, and Going Away. So not a lot of stuff that's going to hit you in the face, but a couple titles here and there maybe you'll recognize. And there's also some other faces in this thing that you're going to just see and you're going to be like, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that guy. We're talking guys like Kip Niven, who is in stuff like Airport 74 and Earthquake, and Robert Donner. Oh shit, come on, man. High Plains Drifter, Rio Lobo, and Murray Hamilton. Dudes. Jaws. That's all I got to say. Jaws, and 1984 and a million other things. We're talking about there are other faces too in this thing that will pop up, and you'll see them and you'll say, I was just giving you a taste, a little taste. Although the cast is not that big, but you'll see some other faces. Just think some of those little dredges of society and that little diner, roadway place, whatever it was, whatever. You'll see some faces. All right, everybody, we're going to do this in 90 seconds or less, so we can keep it short, keep it fast, keep it entertaining, keep it moving, and so we can get to where we'd all much rather be, the summation. You got these two guys, these two Air Force guys, and what is their job? Yes, their job is to man a missile silo. That's one George Peppard, and that's one Jan Michael Vincent. Now, George, he doesn't really care for Jan that much. Nah, he doesn't think he's that serious of a guy, is asking for a transfer, the whole 9 yards. But on that night, as they're working together, all hell breaks loose, and the Ruskies launch a missile attack on the United States of America. Well, their job is to fire back, and that they do. Basically, the scene ends, and you pick up a couple years later. And what do you find out? George Peppard, Jan Michael Vincent, they're all still living at the missile silo. The world has been laid to waste. The climate has gone insane. The atmosphere is destroyed. All hell's broken loose. But they're just kind of still hanging out at this silo because it's a bunker. And hey, they can live there. Jan and some of the guys, they don't take it too seriously. They're just kind of out there. They dropped out of the Air Force. They're getting tans and painting pictures and whatever. And George Peppard and some of the other guys, they're still working hard and trying to keep things going the militaristic way. Well, one of the guys one day, after looking at some Playboy magazines, I kid you not, sets this place on fire because he was smoking a cigarette, and it sets off these two natural gas, whatever they are, and it just blows the shit out of everything. They lose their bunker, and what does that mean? That they're all heading out on the road where they're taken out and taken off in a couple of these super duper top secret all-terrain wonder vehicles that, I don't know what the hell you want to call them, they are what they are. As they headed on the road, they are going to the only place that seems to have any kind of life in it, that kind of mean anything, Albany, New York. That's probably the most fictional point in this whole goddamn movie. I mean, really. But whatever, it is what it is. Along the way, they come across some chick in Las Vegas that they happen to stop in just for shits and giggles, and they find out that she survived because she was having some nookie with some dude deep in the basement or whatever, and they lived and everybody else was laid to waste. So she hooks up with them, and they head off. Along the way, they make a little stop in a city, and in that city they find out it's loaded with killer, super duper cockroaches, and probably one of the best scenes in the movie. We'll get there. And then they take off from there, where they find this young man, one Jackie Earle Haley Kelly Leak himself, where he joins in with them, and now you have this merry little band heading across the desert, off to get to Albany, New York, because it's the only place in the world that survived a nuclear holocaust. Through it all, they run into some derelicts that try to do bad things to the lady, and then they have a massive flood that only Noah himself would be proud of, and, well, I'm not going to tell you what happens after that, but you get the idea. Few survivors, nuclear holocaust. They head out in these super duper buggies. One falls by the wayside, by the way. They're all in one. They keep going. They pick up some stragglers, and they just got to get to upstate New York. Yeah. All right, everybody. Does Damnation Alley work? Yes, it works. Yes. There's a lot of flaws. There's a lot of things wrong. But it does have a certain charm that just makes you love the motion picture. Before we get into it anymore and tear everything apart, let's go through the big three, and you know what they are. The directing, it is what it is. It feels like a TV movie at time, and I'm going to get more into that, but because they got a guy who kind of directed movies that were more in the TV vein. You know what I'm talking about? We're talking about he did TV shows, he did that kind of stuff, and this movie kind of feels like a TV movie because of the directing style. Again, I'll dig more into it in a minute, but let's just keep going. The writing, it's a bit nonsensical. I mean, it doesn't throw you, but everybody's a cartoon. Everybody's a stereotypical cutout of some guy, that kind of a thing. It doesn't wreck anything, but we're not talking Shakespeare in the Park. I mean, it is what it is for this kind of motion picture. Don't expect much, and you won't be let down. In the acting, well, you know, it's actually all right. Jackie Earle Haley's really cool in it. Jan Michael Vincent is Jan Michael Vincent. George Peppard's a little bit stiff, but it is what it is. It's passable for the kind of movie this is. Now, what kind of motion picture is this? Simply put, it's just one of those, hey man, everything's gone bad, and we're going to go off on a little adventure. Now, I know it seems a little bit weird, because the adventure is the world just ended, and we're going to head off out into the road and just do this Mad Max type of thing before Mad Max, and go out there and see what we find and try to make it to upstate New York. But still, it has that feeling of being almost like a happy adventure flick. I know it sounds crazy, because everything's been laid to waste. The world is basically destroyed. But that's the vibe you get from this thing. It never takes itself overtly heavy, but it takes itself kind of seriously enough just to make you feel like, hey, why not? I'm along for the ride. Now, is this movie loaded with problems or plot holes and all that? This movie is a festival of plot holes and non-logical thinking and basically nonsense behavior. I mean, let's face reality, everybody. The whole world gets laid to waste, and nobody seems that broken up about it. I mean, honestly, yes, they have a scene where they're watching all the missiles hit and all that kind of shit, and everybody's staring at the screen like, wow. But you never see anybody break down, freak out, or cry about loved ones dying and family members lost and all this kind of stuff. They're just like, yeah, hey, it's just a day at camp now, you know, it is what it is. And because of that, you kind of lose the sense that this is such a big, large, spectacle, cataclysmic event of this nature. I mean, it doesn't even feel like you have that kind of tension you would in a Terminator-type movie or a Terminator 2, where you're like, they're trying to save humanity. And this doesn't have that kind of a thing. Humanity's gone. They're trying to find some people. And hey, let's have a few laughs and ride some dirt bikes and get there and do what we're going to do along the way. We'll stop in Vegas, play with the slot machines, is what it is. Again, it's weird how they approach it, but it doesn't take away from the fact that the movie is enjoyable. Sure, you can sit back and pick apart the fact that some of the special effects in this thing are possibly the worst special effects you'll ever see in a real motion picture. I mean, they are bad. There's parts where you can see that it's a little model of that super vehicle that they got thrown into a fucking pool and they're supposed to be bobbling around on the water. There's points where you can see that George Peppard or whoever is digging a shovel and they just like put like a photographic cutout of the vehicle, its nose cone in there, and it just looks horrifically Jaws 3D bad. But you got to take it with a grain of salt. It is what it is. It's one of those motion pictures that's not going to look impressive. It's not going to blow your mind. The only thing that you really are impressed by is that crazy-ass vehicle, which probably became just as famous as this motion picture, and probably emerged from this thing the most memorable and biggest star of the motion picture was that big crazy vehicle. I guess it also should be said that this motion picture came out in 1977. Most people seen it on TV or on HBO or some shit like that. So everybody's seen it like maybe around 78, 79. It kind of got more into the consciousness, that kind of a thing. And at that period in time, we were still living in that Cold War era. I was there. I remember what it was like. Duck and cover drills all the time in school. Get down, kids. You won't notice it's 4,000 degrees outside. That kind of a thing. So the fact that there was a nuclear holocaust hanging over your head at all times made this movie a little bit more relevant, I guess, at the time. And the fact that they threw in at the scene at the end of the world, it looks like they took every test site footage that was ever filmed and just did montage of it. It really, if you watch it in that first 10 minutes, it kind of like punches you in the face with the world you lived in back then. Now that we do, right, hell, we kind of still live in that world, but it's a different world, and it's not something that's hanging over your head all the time like it used to be back then. You remember, you'd go to school, you'd have the fallout shelter signs on your building, and you'd do the drills. It was part of life, and this movie came out when that was part of life. So it made it a little bit more maybe special to the people at that time and who remember it of that time than maybe the people that might see it now. But what made it still approachable and enjoyable was it didn't hit you over the head with super amounts of darkness like AKA maybe The Day After or like a Road Warrior movie. This movie still, again, I'm going to say it, felt like a semi-fun, desolate adventure where nobody's that broken up about the world they're living in. It's just, hey, let's get to Albany, New York and find some people. And by the way, the reason I pick on Albany, New York so bad is because I spent the first 27 years of my life growing up and living in Albany, New York. And I promise you now, the only reason Albany, New York would ever survive nuclear holocaust is because nobody wanted to waste a missile on it. That's all I'm going to say. That being said, though, it was funny when they pull into Albany, New York, and you're like, that's not Albany, New York. It's not even close to Albany, New York. Maybe it's some of the outskirts of Albany, New York, where you run into some farmland and shit, but Albany, New York just doesn't look like a little... It is what it is. A lot of it doesn't look like what you see in this movie. Either way, all that being said, get out there and check out Damnation Alley. It's actually a fun little flick if you don't expect much. If you take it as it's a television movie, which is what it really feels like, except for a couple Playboy magazines sprawled out where you can see boobs on it and shit. Other than that, it feels like a TV movie. It's directed like a TV movie. And just because of those scenes, it might elevate it slightly out of there. Sit down one night. Throw a few movies in. Throw in Future World. Throw in something like The Ultimate Warrior with Yul Brynner. Throw in shit of that ilk. And this motion picture will kind of ride in that ballpark. And you'll be like, hey man, I'm having a good triple header with these little crazy flicks from the late 70s and doing what they're going to do. It's that ilk, it's that genre, it's that ballpark. And if you keep it there, you're going to be happy. All right, everybody, be good. Take care. Stay out of trouble. Help a friend. Be kind to a stranger. But most of all, no matter what, never, ever take any bullshit from anybody. And go watch this friggin' movie. It's all over YouTube for free.